Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much indeed for inviting me on, Jack.
No, not a problem at all. It's a subject that is very deep in my heart for the wrong reasons, really. But before we get into it, do you want to just say who you are and who Wild Fish is for people who don't know?
Okay, I'm Nick Measham and I'm the CEO of Wildfish. And Wildfish is a NGO, a charity, which campaigns, no surprise, for wild fish and their habitats. We used to be called Salmon and Trout Conservation. We changed our name in order to try and broaden our appeal, not to get away from salmon and trout and grayling, but actually to reach, we hope, a much wider audience and help try and make fish conservation a more fashionable topic and subject than it sadly is at this current time. I mean, and our basic kind of ethos, if you wanted to sum me up in a sentence, is that um, basically we are working to deliver rivers that are fit for salmon. For if they're fit for salmon, they're fit for anything else that swims, basically. And that will cover some of the issues that I know, Jack, you want to discuss in this program.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. And if anyone isn't a member of Wild, I'll do the membership plug for you so you don't have to, Nick. But if anyone isn't a
That's
member, they should definitely consider it because they are a fantastic organization and you are independent, which I always think is fantastic because it means you can have a bit more bite in your
well,
bark.
yeah. Well, we're configured to be exactly that. I mean, I'm fairly agnostic on where funding would come from, but clearly we won't take any funding that compromises the work that we do. So to that end, because we're fighting for fish and we're fighting against pollution, we're fighting to get regulators to do their job to protect fish, the Environment Agency and Ofwat. That basically knocks out those sources as likely sources of funding. Thankfully, we're getting a big following now in the kind of the broader environmental funders um, arena, but we also are very happy to take to take funding, however modest, from supporters. And one of the most important things really is we crave your listeners' support as much as we crave or more than we crave their finances, really, because numbers really matter in terms of having an impact. And fish are just, unfortunately, a neglected area of our sadly rapidly depleting environment.
I forget the exact figure you quoted, but wasn't it something like the RSPB have 1 million members, and most fish organisations have a fraction of that, don't they? I can't remember the exact figure.
Basically, yeah, well, the number I quoted is that our income this year will be about 800,000, all and more of which is spent on fishy causes. Um, and the CEO doesn't, for some peculiar reason, doesn't have a company jet or a fully loaded Land Rover. I've worked, yeah, joking apart, but no, we get 800,000. The RSPB, you go onto the Charities Commission website, they list all of these things. Their annual income is about 160 million, so they're sort of 200
Jesus.
times our size. And
Yeah.
actually, I know the avian populations of the UK are stressed, but they're nowhere near as stressed as many of the fish populations. So there's this extraordinary mismatch. And I guess I'm one of those people who's never been able to resist a sort of a challenge or a sort of difficult cause, and the cause of fish is certainly that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It is a challenge, and one of the challenges is what we're going to be talking about today is barriers to migration because and we've spoke about this many times before, but um, when you look at all the other things people talk about, like sewage pollution, which is a problem, not negating that,
Yeah.
it's quite a sexy problem if you like. Like people can get behind that and get angry about it, but when you try and get people motivated about a barrier to migration, you can start to see the eyes closing a little bit. And I think it's a shame because it's a problem that is a major problem, but it's also a relatively easy problem to fix. I say that in simple terms, but to start with, what is a weir? What is a barrier to migration for people who won't know what that means?
Okay, well, I take the general definition, I think, actually, which, or our definition would be a, a, a fish or a river barrier is a structure, some are natural, but mostly man-made, which prevents the movement of fish and other aquatic organisms up and downstream a river, basically. And many of these barriers have uses from industrial and agricultural past. Some are justified on the basis of flood defence, land reclamation, environmental management, and some also have been put in for sort of aesthetic reasons. You know, that it was decided to create in the past a water garden for a big house, so you decided
Yeah,
to dam the stream, and things like that have gone on all over the place. But they they are what they are, and that is they are something that is interfering with the natural functioning of a river or a river system. And the stats, actually, I haven't looked it up. I got some. We're doing some work on this, actually. I cribbed it from one of our team. Um, Apparently, the number of barriers on European rivers is well over 1 million, believe
wow.
it or not, and therefore there are very few free-flowing rivers in the whole European network. And in the UK, um, we reckon there's something like 0.75 barriers per kilometre of river. So basically, round that up, there's basically every certainly every kilometre, if not every mile, there's a barrier.
Which is shocking, really, when you think about it, isn't it?
Which is when you think about it, is absolutely shocking. Yeah, and as I say, these things are interfering with the natural functioning of rivers, and very much one of our views is that get rid of these things and let the river do its stuff will be beneficial for fish and all other wildlife too, basically.
Yeah, because like you said, there will be some barriers which I suppose are put in for flood defense, but there'll be lots that are essentially functionless now, that they're just there for their
Yeah.
historic legacies, aren't they? And there's no reason why, um, with the right funding and the right mindset, we couldn't remove them.
Well, that's certainly what we believe to be the case. I mean,
Yeah.
and indeed, I mean, at some point in the not too distant past, I mean, the if you like the legislation to progress barrier removal is it's one of those things that's been sitting on the many millions of different environmental secretaries we've had since I think the 1980s, when this stuff was initially agreed, and it's never been signed off. So there's never been any resources to carry it forwards. And basically the reason for not doing it, I think, is that um, governments have been lobbied by the Green lobby, who pretend that run-of-river hydro schemes actually have some useful contribution to make to our national grid. I mean, that is, in a word, 99% bollocks. But
Is that
these things
right?
were these things were subsidised and therefore popular, and have been, various people have lobbied, and governments have failed to act. And I guess also within our own sort of conservation and fishing communities, there are lots of impediments to remove, ironically, to removing these barriers.
Yeah, well, I mean, and we've talked about this before, haven't we? But where I live in Nottinghamshire on the Trent, it's very, very popular for barbel fishing. And a lot of these weirs are, highly coveted for anglers to fish barbel, because they all kind of, I guess an angler would put it, they all congregate there, but they haven't got much fucking choice. So
No,
they,
that's right. I mean, it's weird, isn't it, that we're fishing for these wild things, but actually we like to have them penned in, so we can make it absurdly easy for ourselves to catch these, or make it easier than it would otherwise be to
yeah,
catch these fish. And I mean, it's not just the fish, the barriers. do, and I'll come back to the migratory impacts on migratory fish. But the other side of it is the things they do to damage water quality and so on, because they hold up the natural flow of a river, so they slow up the water, so sediment sinks out, and you end up with big buildups of sediment. And you see a lot of this on those rivers which historically had a lot of water mills on them.
Mm.
Most of which are now redundant. Well, they are redundant in almost every case. They're no longer operated as a water mill. And traditionally, what would happen is that the mill stream, the water levels would build up overnight, and then in the morning, the horny-handed miller would get up, open the sluices, crank up the water wheel, and get milling, and run down that head of water. That then flushes all of the silt out. You close the sluices at night, build it up, and repeat the process. Of course, we now have the sluices closed because there's nobody in general, and people are sitting on basically a silt trap, and that has with all the adverse consequences that's having in that context, let alone the prevention of migration of fish up and down rivers. And we're not just talking. I mean, clearly, the salmon's life cycle is they spawn in the headwaters of rivers and then hang around for a while as par, and they go through a sort of transition. They become smolts and head off to sea to go and feed and grow before coming back and continuing the salmon circle of life. Well, clearly, the more barriers there are, the more difficult it is for those fish to actually do the job they want to do, which is get up the river in the first place and get down it again.
Yeah.
But it's not only salmon. I mean, I'm never cease to be amazed how much even coarse fish like roach move around up and down rivers. But denying these fish free movement is interfering with their natural life cycle.
All fish are migratory fish is how I like to
Yes.
put it. Whether it's a fish only traveling a mile or a lot of course they did studies with bream and barbel and they tagged them, and some of them were
Yeah.
going 20 kilometers in
Yeah.
river migrations to find the best spawning habitat. And obviously, if they come up against a barrier, that either completely stops them, or it means they have to expend more energy to get over, which means the likelihood of them spawning after is decreased. So they're not producing as many offspring as they normally would. So, yeah, I suppose when we think of barriers to migration, straight away, salmon comes to mind, but all fish are migratory to certain degrees. And if you haven't got that barrier there, it just means they can crack on, they can find the best spawning habitats, and you get more fish in the river. It's as simple as that, isn't it?
Exactly. No, it
Yeah.
really is as simple as that. And the barriers also then cause pinch points where predators, um, cormorants, goosanders, um, otters have basically have it off. I mean, the fish are backed up, and they become a very easy target.
Yeah, all,
And
all, all the food's in one place, isn't it?
yeah,
So where
so
naturally it'd be spread out a little bit more. If it's a
yeah.
weir, all the food's there, so they're going to get hit harder. And
So what do we all do as sort of fishermen, or that you know simple-minded conservationists? We leap to the conclusion that the problem is the predators, and actually the underlying problem, predation, is a symptom of an underlying problem, which is these barriers. And I think that is one of those things that kind of correcting certain things which are seemingly obvious to the casual observer, like it's clear that dealing with cormorants or goosanders is something that needs to be done. Well, in certain circumstances, it may be, but there's not much point sorting that out unless you've sorted out the underlying problems. And that's really what we're about as an organisation. Is we believe in trying to deal with. We don't do river restoration, which has an important role, and so on. We try and focus on the underlying causes and do what we can to kind of get those sorted out, so that the other things that are being done are not being done almost pointlessly, because it's you you carry out river restoration, but you don't fix if you don't fix water quantity and water quality, you haven't really solved the underlying problem. And it's always that that continual battle that we face.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I think you're right. Isn't there a case as well as you mentioned about the silt above the weirs kind of collecting? Don't you get a buildup of chemicals sometimes as well?
you would get within those sediments, you will get you'll get a buildup of chemicals in the sediment, and which may then get released over periods of time and
Yeah,
so on. So yeah, it's a big issue. But I mean, also actually, it's not just simply upstream of the dams. I mean, downstream can have an impact as well. You know, you're not allowing gravels to move around and things like this, things that
yeah.
rivers naturally do to redistribute, um, you know, natural materials and so on. So yeah, I mean, the whole thing can be highly problematic.
Because I think one of the interesting things with the whole barrier to migration and whatnot is that it is a complex issue. But it's also, you know, with if everything's done, it's something that can literally be solved overnight. Like we're not going to solve the sewage crisis overnight. We're not going to solve salmon farms overnight. But literally with a stick of dynamite in the middle of a weir, that can have a drastic effect on a river straight
Yes.
away. So
Yeah,
it's one of the few things that, you know, if we get on with it, it's quite a quick fix, which is rare in conservation, really.
it is. I mean, it's a quick and very clear fix in many places. And I mean, you know, I think an awful lot of those weirs, as you say, on our rivers are truly redundant.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I'm simplifying it massively there, but
yeah,
essentially, you know, if everyone nods their head and agrees, then it's a you know it's a quick thing. I know that there's a video online actually of a weir not too far from me called Snake Lane Weir on the Ecclesbourne in
yes,
Derbyshire, and the weir was horrific. It was something like 9 foot tall, almost vertical. So salmon would get to the lip of it. There weren't many salmon in there, but the odd one. And the Wild Trout Trust managed to pull the funding out and get rid of it. And now there's this lovely cascade of babbling water and rocks, and the salmon have straight away been found a few miles upstream of it, so they've been able to navigate it. So that was in the first year. You know, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. It does work.
yes. I mean, absolutely. And I mean, we have to do everything we can for these wild fish populations because they are so pressured and you know, salmon in particular. So denying them access to valuable spawning habitat is absolutely bonkers in our view.
It is, and I suppose while we're on the subject of salmon, we can also mention that literally a couple of days ago, as of recording, salmon have been reclassified, haven't they? So do you want to just kind of
Yes,
talk me through it?
yeah, there have been, and this is actually um, partly the IUCN, the International Union of Conservation Networks, who are the keeper of the red list or the most recognised version of it. There are they've carried out an assessment of Atlantic salmon populations across their entire range around the North Atlantic, and this is the first time this is the first reassessment of at that global population level for 25 years, I think it is
Yeah,
24, 25 years. Um, so it hadn't been done for a very long time, and but the salmon was sitting there as least endangered, even though we've seen massive declines in their populations in many places, but they didn't have that kind of red listing classification. Well, they now do. They've been reclassified, and interestingly, the UK's population comes out worst. It has been classified as endangered, well and truly red listed. The the global population comes out as I think threatened or whatever. One step down from that, but nonetheless, all of this should highlight the fact and much more widely that there really is a problem with salmon, and it will help put pressure on politicians to start to deal with all of the issues surrounding them. One of which is barriers to migration. The others, the open net salmon farming, water quality, and so on. But the great thing is that, as an organisation, we have to be kind of practical. There's lots of things we'd like to do, but certainly beyond our scope, and certainly beyond the scope of an organisation with an income of less than £1 million a year. But two practical things you can do something about, that man can do. We can do something about open net salmon farming, and we can do something about barriers. I mean, they are. I'm not suggesting that it's going to be straightforward to get these things to happen. Nothing in conservation is ever straightforward, but these are things. They're tangible, soluble, clearly, issues that can be dealt with, and it's dealing with barriers is a matter essentially of a political will to make sure that unless they're absolutely necessary, they need to go, and where they are necessary, that we put in place mitigation, i.e. rock ramps, so that fish have fish passes in general, that the fish can actually move about.
Yeah, I think that it's actually
It's
something.
not. It's not impossible.
No, and I think that's actually, we haven't mentioned, have we, about fish passes and whatnot, but where it's not possible to remove the dam, get fish passes in. So essentially, the weir, sorry. Essentially, there's no reason why either we don't remove the weir or you put a fish pass in, so that regardless, fish have got free movement.
Yeah.
That's what needs to be done. So I think if I read between the lines, what you're saying, Nick, is if anyone's got any spare dynamite lying around, go and
Yeah.
blow up as many weirs as possible.
Well, wouldn't it be a wonderful way of spending a Sunday morning? Well,
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to check my shed. I'm not sure if I've got any left, but if I
yeah,
have, there's one or two weirs on the Trent that would definitely get a stick chucked
yeah.
in there because
And
it is
have
dreadful.
you actually done, Jack? I'm turning things around. Have you done much filming of the impacts of these barriers, of fish building up below them, and
Yeah, I've filmed on a few. So like the big weir on the Trent is Collingham, which is sort of the area where I think there's a 3 year waiting list for barbel anglers. That's how bonkers it is. But I managed to get some cameras right up against the weir a few
Mm,
years ago, and there was a line of not only barbel but salmon just waiting to try and get up there. And
yeah,
the other thing is that just because a weir is passable doesn't mean that that's good either. So fish might be able to get over, but they're still expending energy when they wouldn't be. So all the weirs on the Trent are passable. I use the term passable with quoted fingers here. But those
yes,
salmon are still fighting to get up them. There could be a lot of improvements. And in fairness, I think there is a project called the Trent Gateway Project where they're trying to emulate what they've done on the Severn, which is good. But
yes,
um, but yeah, that I do notice when I put cameras in amongst weirs, there is very often a queue of fish, if you like, waiting to go up there, and they obviously want to. I know one of the things people always say is in the summer weirs are good for oxygen, but I don't know if there's any science behind that. I think that's just people seeing bubbles moving around and they assume it's good, but by that
yeah,
logic, you'd have no fish anywhere else in the river. So I don't know
yeah.
the science
Well,
behind that.
I suppose they might be relatively good, but by turning things round, the river above the weir becomes a sort of becomes depleted for oxygen. So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
win
yeah.
some, you lose. I mean, and I suspect, and overall, I would guess that um, the overall oxygenation is neutral at best. So
Yeah. I think you're right. I think it's just one of those things people sort of tell themselves, oh, the fish are all against the weir because there's oxygen. I think, well, yeah, not
and the other
comparatively.
argument, and some fish like the slow flowing water above a weir, they well, do they?
They haven't got much choice, have they?
Unfortunately, they haven't got any. They've actually got no choice. So
Yeah.
I think we really need to be doing much more around these barriers to in rivers.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it is the forgotten issue in river conservation. As I say, everyone is talking about sewage at the minute, which is good. I'm not knocking that. I think it's brilliant. We do need to be talking about that. But the barriers seem to be kind of pushed to the side a little bit, and I think it's another problem that we need to address
Well,
and correct, hopefully.
Yeah, it's one that we are endeavouring to work on, and I'm sure that others will join.
Yeah.
I would hope will join in.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And sort of circling back round to when you on about the salmon, it's kind of worrying and shocking in a way that a fish that is arguably the most iconic fish. I mean, you talk to anyone who doesn't know anything about fish in the UK, they'll know what a salmon is. And to think that,
Yes.
conceivably we could lose salmon in the UK. I mean, even within my lifetime, I don't think it's too much
Well,
of a
yeah,
stretch.
well, it has. Yeah, I mean that is. I think that's sadly, I think that's the case. I mean, the population declines have been, significant. They've been. It's all been well documented, and the 30, 40, 50%, whatever. I mean, but what really rams it home is that it's not those sort of percentages. It's when you're on a river or you're, as you might be in your professional capacity or fishing or me
Yeah.
likewise. Just the fact that there's so few of these things about.
Well, I
So
went
few of these
to,
fish about.
yeah, no, there is definitely. I went to Alaska last year. I think I told you about this before, but and there was, thousands and thousands of Pacific salmon.
Yes.
And I just thought, surely somewhere down the line, we must have had that in the. I don't know if it's been. Presumably there's literature out there. I've not really looked into it, but there must have been like that or something similar in the UK. Because if you think about it, if I'm on a river now filming salmon, and I see half a dozen, that's a good day. I'm like bloody hell, six salmon. That's amazing. When you think about it, it's worrying, really, isn't it? It's not a good thing.
It is.
Uh,
No, it is absolutely worrying. I mean, it's well documented. Uh, it's well documented that in London, the apprentices in sort of in medieval times often rioted because they didn't want to be fed any more salmon. Because salmon was
wow.
quite plentiful. I actually think, and I most interestingly read that actually it wasn't the fresh salmon going upstream that they were being fed. It was the dead Celts that
All
their
right.
their mean their mean employers were feeding them on. So I could partly understand their you can certainly understand their objection to that if that was the case. But the
Yeah.
real point is that I was talking to someone else a day or two, a senior conservation scientist, and I said, well, of course, the biggest chalk stream in England is the Thames, and or would be, and it and all of its tributaries would have been stuffed with salmon.
Yeah.
So all of those rivers, the Chess, those rivers that come off the North Downs, chalks, which are coming out of the chalk, all of those would have had salmon in them. The Thames itself would have had salmon in it. The Kennet, you know, they would have all been, and all the Cotswold streams um, would have seen salmon in them.
And they're pretty
Uh,
much non-existent. Yeah, when I think of the Thames,
it's
salmon are the
non-existent.
last fish I
Yeah,
think of.
it's pretty much non-existent. And the
Yeah,
other side of it is that you look at other rivers, the chalk streams, salmon had thriving salmon populations. They're now tragically depleted. I mean, on the you know, and I think it's the case that even those rivers that are doing in inverted commas relatively well, maybe the Tyne and others, many of those rivers are struggling to actually get above what the fish scientists call their sort of conservation limits, i.e., the level of population which provides for a semi well they would say a sustainable population, but I mean for me a sustainable population is one that has a sufficient abundance to enable us to occasionally take one of these fish. I mean that
yeah.
would be to be able to do that would be fantastic. Of course that I don't know a river in the UK where that is something that I would feel comfortable doing now, which
No, no,
is a
no.
really sad state of affairs.
Because I
But
remember, I think was it last year or the year before that, the River Severn, the Environment Agency published a report of their rough numbers of salmon. They're able to monitor them through fish catchers and
yeah,
counters and whatnot, and it was something like 2,000 fish. Which again, like in layman's terms, sounds like a lot, but if you think about the River Severn, it's the longest or largest river in the UK. Spread out 2,000 salmon among that, it's nothing. I mean, if the biggest river's only got that amount of salmon, roughly, it's I think in fact they actually banned salmon fishing a year or two ago, I think.
Yes,
Or
I mean,
they
yeah.
they did do that, did they? Yeah, okay.
Well, I think well, I'm not sure whether they did, but they certainly recommend. I think there are times when recommendations have gone out
Right,
to
okay. Yeah, I might be
not
getting that
to do.
wrong. There was something where they maybe suggested people don't fish or something like that. But
Oh,
yeah, the numbers were getting critical on there,
yes,
which is
definitely, and that's you look at the rivers in Scotland, the rivers in Wales. Wales are in a particularly parlous state um, as well. It is tough. I mean, it is really tough.
so
Against
people.
that, go on.
Sorry, Nick. So people
Yeah,
will naturally then say, what can we do? Obviously, we've talked about all these problems
yeah.
and the doom and gloom of salmon. What can we do? What is the solution?
Well, I mean, as I said, what are the solutions? There are problems, or seem perceived to be problems at sea on the high seas.
Yeah,
What we've done there, and it's been done for years, has been a moratorium on exporting salmon stocks, so they're not netted any. There's no commercial netting taking place any longer, and that hasn't been that's been the case for 20, 30 years more. A thing called the North Atlantic Salmon Conservation Organization, which is a sort of treaty organization, a bit like NATO. All of the countries that have salmon in their rivers around the North Atlantic came together and decided not to fish at sea. However, the problem now is that, if you like, that stopped. What hasn't stopped, of course, are all the problems in all of the countries themselves. And there you have the complex problems like we have in the UK of the various interest groups that want to keep barriers, the various interest groups that want to water companies and farmers that want to take water out of rivers, pollute rivers, and so on. And again, fish farming, a problem in Canada, the eastern seaboard of Canada, the Atlantic seaboard of Canada, a huge problem in Scotland. And actually, paradoxically, people say that, oh, well, the East Coast Scottish rivers have also declined and they don't have salmon farms on them. No, they don't. But what they do have is that their smolts, and no, it's interesting that not a lot of work has been done on this, as far as I'm aware. Their smolts have to truck past the Orkneys and Shetland Islands, which are festooned with salmon farms, which also have the worst sea lice performance. So that's an impact. So what we can do, I'm saying, is that we need to focus pretty ruthlessly on the causes of the problems in those areas where we can do something about it. And there's no doubt that where salmon farming exists, it is the number one problem for wild salmon and that other wonderful fish that doesn't get as much airtime as it deserves, sea trout.
yeah,
And then turning to the inland story, barriers to denying fish access to spawning habitat. That habitat is being compromised by abstraction and by pollution. So all of these things are things we can if we want address. But again, it's getting that. The challenge really is getting the political will and also the public sense of public urgency or public awareness of the problem and support of doing something for fish. Because I think if it was we were dealing with a furry animal, then it would be a lot easier. But here we have this absolutely amazing fish, the Atlantic salmon, with its truly awe-inspiring life cycle. It travels 3,000 miles to Greenland or to the edge of the polar ice cap, north of the Faroe Islands, to feed and grow before coming back to spawn again. It is truly remarkable, and I don't know anybody who has, when they've looked into this and start to understand what this fish achieves, um, isn't really impressed by it, and but it's getting that awareness out there, which is just so tough.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Whenever I've talked to anyone about what can you do, it ultimately always goes back to public perception and political will. I
Yeah,
think like there's little things you can do, but ultimately, the more people that are talking about it, the better. And essentially, if you want something done, it comes down to politics,
yeah.
doesn't it?
And
So I
I would say, I mean, I also want people to support wild fish, and I think it's probably one of the best organisations they can support if they want to bring about real change to our watery environment and all of the fish and other aquatic creatures that thrive in it. But just get involved, even if you don't, whether you fish or not, just just get involved. Put your wellies on and go down to your local stream or river and join the local rivers trust or wildlife trust, whatever floats your boat. But we've got to do more of this because we otherwise we are going to lose.
think
I
it is the
I
message
think
is getting across a little bit, isn't it? Because I think certainly the next general election, I suppose sewage is mainly propping it up mostly, but rivers in general, it's going to be a big political point. A lot of people, and I do hope that the politicians are taking notice of it because I think that it will be a factor. Certainly, I mean, it might be kind of over dramatizing it, but I think a lot of people will are fed up of how our rivers are, and that will factor into how people ultimately vote when we get to the next election.
Yep. Well, that's what I hope. I hope that all of the political parties pick up on it. They should, and they really need to reflect the fact that we get all this talk about, and it's understandable, growth. We want growth because growth makes it easier to correct some of the cost of living problems or the poverty problems that we suffer in our society without necessarily having to put taxes up too much. But the problem with all of that debate is it shies away from the fact that what is growth and prosperity without a healthy environment in which to enjoy the benefits of growth, and we've lost sight of that in this country, but very badly. And I think um, I think
Yeah, no, I think you're right, Nick. I think yeah,
it is so difficult. And I agree, all these things are difficult, but we need to balance these things up. And you know, we are, by many accounts, one of the worst performing countries, not only in Europe, in the world, in terms of our loss of biodiversity
yeah,
terrestrially, and it's even worse with regard to the aquatic environment,
yeah,
or the word I learned the other day, the hydrosphere. So yeah, I think you'd like that one.
yeah. I do like that one. Not
We
heard
really
that
do
one.
need we need politicians with the courage to address some of these things, which sadly has been lacking for far too long. And I hope with the efforts of people like Fergal Sharkey um, and others that it has sewage becomes a sort of totemic, but we don't lose sight of all the other problems as well.
No, yeah. I think you're right, Nick. I think you're right.
Uh,
If we've inspired some people to find out more about wild fish, what's the best place to go? Your website,
well,
presumably.
I think get wildfish.org, go onto that, um, and hopefully that will lead you into the world of what we're doing. And we'd love to hear from you, um, good or bad. We welcome criticism as well as support. And as I
Because
say, the real issue is just get involved. I'd love you to get involved with what we're trying to do. I'd love your input, feedback, whatever. We've got to do do everything we can and break down all of the sort of barriers to doing stuff. Not only dynamiting a weir. Now, wouldn't that be wonderful as a auction auction off auction off auction off a prize in our auction or something like that. Um, but
I'd bid on that. That'd be brilliant.
it's just just I don't know how you find it when you're talking to the various organisations you talk to, how people react. But I have got a sense that people are beginning to wake up to the
No, I,
problems.
I think they are, and even people who aren't in our little fishy bubble. So I'll just talk to
Yeah,
friends and family who aren't particularly interested in rivers and fish, and they'll go, "Oh yeah, aren't rivers full of turds now?" And I go, "Well, yeah, more or less. You know that there's a bit more to it than that, but essentially you've hit the nail on the head." So
yeah,
I think it is getting through the public zeitgeist, and people
yeah,
are picking up on it. But look, it's a
yeah.
pleasure as always to talk to you, Nick, and I don't need much of an excuse to waffle to you
No, well,
about
it's
fish.
been fantastic. Thank you for allowing me to talk talk on all of these sorts of issues about which I'm absolutely passionate. And if it's engendered a little bit of interest in even one of your readers, it'll be listeners, sorry, uh, it'll be worth it.
Exactly. No, look, we'll take care, buddy. Cheers.
And you too. Okay, bye.